So when did kids just stop playing sports and start building their own brands?
And now we have even middle schoolers with recruiting accounts.
Yeah, we're talking, highlight reels, Instagram posts, YouTube accounts, already setting up NIL deals.
And most of them aren't even in high school yet.
So is this helping sports out in general, or is it really hurting everyone's brand all around?
Let's find out.
Hey, so welcome back to the Buy Your Kids a House podcast. Again, I'm Matt. This is Andrew. And this is where we kind of go over, kids and youth activities. And today we're going to kind of go over the idea of, kids now building a brand and NIL and the impact that's having on not just college sports, but also their lives and everything in general. Because we all can admit that that has changed a lot, especially in these last couple of years since NIL has become a thing. So we're going to kind of go over a little bit of what, building a brand is. I do think actually is something important done if it's done in the right way. What NIL and that impact towards colleges, and maybe where kids are getting the wrong information of chasing NIL money versus their long term career, trying to chase the transfer portal, how that what they should be more focused on, everything for the longevity of the career, and maybe how to do it in the right way to help benefit them not only for their college career but the pro career and even beyond the pro career. Because let's be honest, most kids don't make it pro. So
Yeah, and there's so many layers to it too. Once you start entering into the NIL and different things like that, it just becomes so much more complicated. And to be able to navigate it, and how even in the industry, everything is always changing as well. And we're going to take a look into that as well.
yeah, so let's cover all that. And again, be here to the end because there's a lot of it to cover in this area. Also, again, we're still a new growing channel, so please share, like, subscribe, help us out. We're trying to get out there for everything. And then also, please put in the comments and everything if you are experiencing it. Maybe you have friends and family that are going through this. They're in the high school level, entering college, or already in college, just seeing the impacts from this and everything. Because really, it is, in the last 5 to 10 years, this has really changed dramatically. So let's go ahead and start covering all that. So I think before we really dive into the elements of what is changing and what could be help fix in this process, we need to kind of go over first off what is NIL and the transfer portal and the boundaries of that. Because some people on here might be asking, what the heck does NIL stand for? It's basically name, image, and likeness. It's a way for kids, or I say kids, but young adults and everything, as they're going through the process of having the sponsorships and everything built around them, of what they can do to actually start earning income based off of literally their name, image, and likeness, because they are now becoming a brand within the athlete of the system of the position they're playing for, or the team and school that they're playing for. And then from that, also the other element, which is the transfer portal, which has become much more available for athletes. So basically each year now they can actually have the potential of moving from a college to college. And a lot of times they're doing this because they feel that they need to chase more and more NIL money out there, because they don't feel that maybe the school they originally went to has the opportunity that was maybe promised to them, or it's not planning out the way that they hope for and everything. So we're going to kind of go over what those are and what NIL actually really means and where it goes from there.
Yeah, and once the money enters in, everything kind of changes. Like you have, like you were saying, those local sponsorships or your scholarships and the recruiters and things like that, going over all of those topics and how to navigate through that, because it's changed a lot even in the past few years on how it's navigated and what is the expectations, and looking at the NIL money and going maybe that route or not, and sticking it through. It's all combined together, and it creates a lot of complications, but can be rewarding if you do it correctly.
Yeah. And right now, we're still kind of that early phase. I like to call it almost like the wild, wild west. Where things aren't as regulated or structured with what actually the money benefit is for NIL. The original aspects thought of it was maybe you had like a sponsorship of a local car dealership, and the thought was originally you actually had to maybe do commercials or actually go to a car dealership for like a ribbon cutting ceremony. Go there, shake some hands, wave, get some photos. But now a lot of times we're finding things out, like car dealerships are giving the NIL sponsorship, but not actually requiring the athlete to come out and do those things or fulfill their obligations. So what was meant to be as actually like earning money from like you see obviously like the professional athletes doing television commercials, like you see Patrick Mahomes on every other commercial scenes these days,
Yeah.
everything. But it used to be that aspect for college kids, now entering that idea of branding, going, and maybe not like getting the Nike shoe deal yet, but like the beginning part of it, like little local stores and things sponsoring things, is now kind of really turning into a lot of rich local alumni of the school now just cutting checks to these kids to just play for that school. And that's where I think that the disconnect comes in of what the intent of NIL was meant for. because I do feel that the athletes should be paid appropriately for their name, image, and likeness. I mean, they are now an entity.
Mhm.
They're bringing their own awareness and brand to the schools, not just the school they're playing for. Now, granted, the schools do have a big brand as well, especially your larger D1 schools. But that athlete in there deserves their own fair share. We were talking earlier. Kind of what got this started was, everyone knows the old EA game, NCAA, and
Yeah.
everything. And it used to be years ago they couldn't pay the college kids because they were, before the age of NIL, like they weren't able to receive a monetary benefit. So they would create players on the school that had a very similar profile to these guys. Like back, I'm a Gator fan, so you'd have, instead of having Tim Tebow on there with number 15, you'd have Mitt Weibo on there with the same build, cut number 15 jersey. So unfortunately, Tim Tebow didn't get any money from it, but the school sure as heck raked in a lot of money, and that's where I think a lot of people had the bad taste in their mouth was like, well, how is it that the school can make all this money off the name, image, and likeness of Tim Tebow, but Tim Tebow, the college athlete, couldn't get a dime of that because it was inappropriate in the funding? And yes, I understand he's getting a scholarship. And scholarships are very important, especially for those that are not going pro and you want to build your actual career going forward. But let's be real, schools are making billions of dollars off the idea of these few kids that are actually able to perform on the field, and they deserve a cut of that as well. And that's down the road. I think something that we should look for is more of a profit sharing model. But the at least first step of that was the ability of name, image, and likeness, where EA video game could then contribute money to a fund that could be dispersed amount to the players that actually are in the video game, or again having the local car dealerships and everything sponsor anything, but you actually need to have an actual transaction. What I don't like is what it's turned into is a lot of the old rich alumni, like famously right now we have Phil Knight with Oregon that just wants a national championship before he just basically want to cut blind checks to get players out there.
Yeah.
And you see like the high end marquee players like Carson Beck going from Georgia to Miami last year, took his team to a national championship game, so obviously a good investment. But that's where a lot of times the kids get enamored with the idea of like, well, I went from Georgia to Miami, a national championship, and he got probably about $4 million in that process. But what comes into problem is a lot of times kids enter transfer portal and they find out that it's not quite what it's cut out to be.
Yeah, they look at it and they have all these hopes and expectations, and they go on the portal and then they find out, oh, well, now I've got nothing. And that's where it really just kind of takes a dive. And like you said, the problem that's coming in right now is the fact that all these alumni that have built up their careers, they're writing the blank checks. And then you're eliminating all of the rest of the NILs and things like that, to where some of these players should be getting a little bit more money out of it. And maybe not all of it, obviously, but like sharing, like you said, like having it split and being able to see some profit off of their own image and likeness.
Yeah. And again, I think that NIL is a first step to a better system because we all can admit, even before NIL existed, kids were getting paid.
Yeah.
Like there was just under the table. It was a lot more shady deals back then. I jokingly talk about Tim Tebow, like way back in my day. Early 2000s when I first was going to college. A friend of mine was playing for UF as a lineman, so I'd go up and visit and hang out with him. And you go to the parking lot, and this was before the age of getting paid. Well, all the kids' cars were all Mercedes and Audis and Lexuses. like those college kids aren't paying for those cars.
Nope.
So some way, somehow.
Those?
And obviously we all know Reggie Bush is very famous for getting called out of at USC. Got money for his parents to get a house and things inappropriately, and they unfortunately took away his Heisman Trophy because of it. And there was a lot of sanctions put on USC as a school. But let's be honest, all these schools were doing that, and then so I do think that we don't want where like things are in the shadows. We want it brought to light. We want it legitimate and everything out there. That NIL deal right now is the first step of that. But now we just need to hone in a little bit of exactly like maybe a structure of like how much each school can use, the allocation, how that money goes for, and plus there actually being a legit tangible item for the exchange of your goods and services with it, not just, oh, they did some car commercials for me, and like, well, no, they didn't. Like, where is the car commercial?
Yeah, where do we see that?
Yeah. So I think that is, the first step of NIL. At least we're bringing it to light of no longer the shady dealings and everything, but we now need to kind of create the regulations in place and the guardrails to make sure that what actually could be done for moving forward in the process to make it where it is more fair and equitable for the players and also for the teams. And also you don't also have then the haves versus have-nots, because as we've all seen in the last couple of years, for the most part, I know this year was a little bit of an anomaly with Indiana winning the national championship, but for the most part, we're still seeing, Ohio State, Alabama, the big blue bloods because they got a lot of donor money. They're basically able to come right out and write big checks and get the national championship for their players because they're buying, these NIL player
Right.
kits. So,
All of the best that they can, they get everyone they can. And I agree, having more of that structure is definitely something that's needed in this. Being
yeah.
able to have those guidelines and something more structured, like I said, to follow is going to be something that is going to take some time, but overall, I think that's going to help a lot.
Yeah.
And I mean, all of these things are changing so much, especially with social media being so huge right now.
Yeah.
It's insane how much it's changed over like being able to do your NILs and things like that just because of you having your own account. And
Yeah.
I think we're going to go into that next.
Yeah. Let's go and dive into what is building a brand these days. So,
All right. All right, so now we're going to talk about how social media has started to affect everything. And it used to be if you played well, you'd get noticed. Nowadays, with social media, you're expected to have all of these different highlights and show yourself and then hope that someone's going to see that, a recruiter or someone from a different school or different things like that you want to play for, to be able to see your stuff instead of just meet in person. Because before it used to be a face-to-face. Recruiters would come, they would see you play in high school, things like that. But social media has kind of taken, to an extent, the replacement of that, to where now you're responsible for showing all of these different things.
Yeah. Now it's basically produce content, and now you hope someone will catch on with that. And don't get me wrong, I do think building a brand, even for a younger person in high school and everything, is important. We're both big fans of Gary Vee in the book Crush It, and he talks about building his own personal brand. We're trying to do that right now. We're trying to build our own brand. I'm trying to have my kids build out their own brand and what they're passionate about, what they want to do. I think building a brand on your platforms, everything in general, is important. However, there's a fine line of having to do that because, especially if you're just trying to be a collegiate athlete and everything, you have to go out there, you have to build out, you go play, you're practicing hard, you're going to, lessons, you're doing all the work, you're working out, you're lifting, you're doing all the things to try to get out there. Well, now you have to have Instagram photos of your workouts, and you have to have highlight reels of the the big plays and everything you're doing, and you're having to have showing to the big brands, like you got the fancy cars and the outfits, even though you maybe don't have the money to do that yet. You're having to create this persona out there, because even college teams are now even looking at they want to see how many followers do you have, how many subscribers, how many likes, how many videos do you have out there. They're taking that into account now when they're bringing people onto their campus and showing it, because they're looking at it as a synergy brand, not just like you playing for the school, but what can this person, player X, bring to my organization and grow from there. And that could be a very slippery slope. Like at the professional level, sure, again, you're a professional adult, you're a professional athlete out there, you're getting paid from that. I think one of the most famous smaller but growing brands right now is the Savannah Bananas doing that.
Yeah.
What really helped launch them a lot was not only their social media push, but they brought in players that had their own social media following, and then they synergy that together, with Coach Rack and other players, on there. Jackson Olsen, come to mind, and like they're out there. They had their own individual brands on TikTok and YouTube and everything out there before they became a Savannah Banana. But now they're married together, and boom, they both exploded because of that.
Yeah.
And that's at the professional level. And that's great. At the college level, I get a little nervous about that and everything, because again, we're wanting these kids to actually go to school, get an education, hopefully, finish their degree, and then we want them to go pro, absolutely. Yeah. But when you're more worried about like the highlight reels and everything, especially if you go to college, a lot of times kids who are maybe a big fish, a small pond, or wherever they come from, they were having tons and tons of highlight reel. Well, now you go to that big D1 school as a redshirt freshman. Also, now you're riding the bench and your content dries up. A lot of times now kids might get the idea of, well, maybe this isn't the right school for me and everything. So they start thinking about maybe I was lied to, or my trust was misplaced in the wrong coach. And now they start looking at the transfer portal and things like that because they feel they got to get out there because they're not quite getting the quite highlight reels and content out there that they were doing at the high school level. And that maybe is, a slippery slope in that process, because again, you want these kids maybe to learn to persevere and everything. A lot of these schools, especially famously Alabama for years under Nick Saban, were doing, okay, you came in from high school to the college level. Well, you were a redshirted freshman year because we got to get you in our weight room. We need you to have our nutritionist. We need to learn the playbook. You need to get in the system. You need to put on the weight. But in 3 years, you're going to win a national championship and I'm going to get you to the NFL level. Like there was a process to it.
Right.
But kids now that maybe are going that redshirt freshman year, all of a sudden they're like, well, I'm not playing, I'm redshirt. I can't play at all. Or like, I'm a freshman. I'm not getting as much playing time.
Right.
And then they get the bad advice from friends and family around them. Like, hey, your video contents are down because, you're not having the content to put out there because you're not having game highlight reels,
Right.
And yeah, you can post workout videos and everything, but if you're not having the highlights go along with it, like that hurts your brand. And now you start thinking about like, oh, my brand is taking a hit. So my brand isn't now an Alabama football player. My brand is player X, and player X now like looks at like I need to transfer out. And in the long term and everything, a lot of times that can be very hurtful for them.
Right. No, exactly. Because like you said, it's in the long game, and it sucks that they're really looking at more of the social media stuff than they used to, because shouldn't matter whether or not the player has 100,000 followers or so many views or booming on social media, because what should matter is their playing ability and then the ability to be able to find that structure within that team. To be able to put in the work to, like you were saying, freshmen, yeah, you probably are only going to be, training, get on their nutritionist and, like practices and things like that. But the next year and the year after that, you're just going to start playing a lot more. That highlight reel will come back. And the fact that they don't value that gap anymore is really disheartening.
Yeah. And that's where, again, there's a struggle a lot for a lot of these college teams even. And, I know Nick Saban won't say it, but I feel that that's probably why he left coaching in general was because, for him it was exhausting already going to a high school player's house, recruiting them, going through the process, getting them into the system. But now because of the transfer portal and the ease of that, like I'm having now to massage the egos of that freshman and even sophomore player, because if you redshirt and then you become a freshman your sophomore year player, you're having to keep them in your system and to trust the process. So they, and then you have to actually go and win football games.
Yeah.
So like, there's so many layers to it and everything that's tough and exhausting, because it's like I have a plan for you, but that plan takes time to develop. And a lot of times when you have social media and the shorter attention span with that, you have that need for instant gratification, and that doesn't take time to process of getting a year or two down the road. You're not willing to put in work. You're not willing to persevere through. Or maybe you come in and there's actually tough competition at your position, and instead of looking like, well, I need to work harder to beat out that player, you look at it like, well, then I should just transfer out and everything. So that's where social media, I feel like, hurts things. And again, I think we still, building a brand is important, and but like you got to make sure you have the wherewithal and the perseverance to push through the boundaries of not just ducking when it gets a little tough, or giving up when things don't quite go your way, or taking the easier path and everything. Because, again, if you push through harder and everything, it can build your brand much bigger for long term with that.
Well, no, exactly. And even more than just like a brand and being able to get the position you want and working hard and being persistent with it and pushing through all of that, that's going to teach you a lot more later in life. Like later when you have to do this again, like you'll have to push through something. You're not going to always want to do what you are told to do or the situations you're put in. But to be able to have that structure from an early age, to be like, hey, no, listen, you accomplish things by not giving up.
Yeah.
And you keep going and you keep doing it. It's not all about social media. It's not about, and all those things can help, but it's not about the money. It should be about the enjoyment of the playing, getting the education, being able to endure whatever gets thrown at you, because later in life, you're going to want that. You're going to want that knowledge and experience that you went through to get there, instead of just taking the easy way out and hoping that you're going to get picked back up on the portal somewhere. And a lot of these kids don't.
No, that could be dangerous. And then one other major aspect that we haven't even really touched on, the dangerous side of social media also, is the flashy lifestyle aspect of it. We hinted at it earlier with the cars and the shoes and everything, but there also comes the cars and the nightlife and everything, and a lot of times that could be a major distraction from buckling down and focusing on the grind of whatever sport it is you're trying to play, or whatever the task is you're trying to grow at. And then if you're more worried about keeping up with the nightlife, going to the fancy events, staying out partying all night, you want that content on there because it looks fun. You see, and don't get me wrong, being at a club and popping bottles and having a video of that and throwing it on there and it's fun. I get that. But if you have a lot of that going, all of a sudden you wake up a little later. You start showing up. You're not putting as much into practice and everything because you're hurting a little bit from last night from staying out too late. And then, as I mentioned about trying to beat out other players for a position, well, now you don't have it in you to beat out that player for another position.
Exactly.
So if you're worrying about, sometimes that, the flashier side of social media, which can be very seductive with it, because again, it's fun to have those Instagram posts and everything of you in the club with the expensive bottle of champagne and, again, riding around in flashy cars and everything. But, there comes a price with that. And that price could be a very short end to your professional career or even semi-professional career at the collegiate level because you're not putting in the work actually being on the field with that. So.
No, exactly. And that's where, leading into the next segment is the money aspect, because they want to put on all of these different, shows that, oh, hey, look, I'm doing fine. All these fancy cars, nightclubs, fancy bottles, things like that. When really the money is not coming in necessarily for that moment or those times. But money really changes everything.
Yeah, and again, if done right, some college players might not even need to go pro because you have enough money on that. We're going to kind of dive into, how to structure that and make sure you're protecting your money in that process, being smart with the income of it. Because again, our main premise here is about being smarter with your money. So let's go ahead and kind of dive into, how to set your kids up for success that maybe are looking to enter college, or even if you have current college kids, help guide them now and everything, because we want them to, maybe if they don't turn pro, have enough money to change their life and everything, because this is life-changing money.
Yeah, it really is. Yeah. So let's look into the money part.
Yeah.
All right, so next we're going to be talking about the money aspect of it. And NIL money is real.
Yeah, again, there's potential, definitely. This is life-changing money. Even if you're, only getting a few grand every year, all the way up towards the players are getting a few million every year. I mean, this can be truly life-changing money and potentially even retirement money if done right. And we need to have that structure in place of educating young athletes, at the high school, entering college level, or during the college level, of how to structure things. Because even if you're getting an NIL deal, the chance of going pro is still very small. So take the money you have and hold on to it. Yes, enjoy probably about 10% of your money, but the other 90% we need to structure and put away, because there's a real chance that if you come out of this, you can have enough to retire on if done right. There's even talk now, judge recently ruled that your junior college years don't count towards your playing career. So you can now potentially have 2 junior college years, a redshirt freshman year, and then 4 years of playing. So that could be 7 playing years.
Yeah.
If you have 7 years, of NIL deals, even if you're only getting a few grand, 10 grand or so every year, that could be 100 plus grand, everything by the time you're done. That's life-changing money to get started in whatever career you're going to have. Because if you come out 25 with already 100 grand in the bank and everything, you're way ahead of the game of most people. If you're very lucky and have a few million, that could be enough to retire on at that point. If you got 5 to 10 million out of that, that's enough to retire on if structured right.
That's huge. And I think you hit the nail on the head there, talking about teaching them how to be smart with it. Because who among us when we're young, we're smart with money? Not typically. Typically you overspend, you think, oh, I got plenty of time in the future to do all of these things. But if you in 7 years have the ability to build up that much money and to be able to be smart with it, invest it, max out everything you can, and have all of that set up, by the time you're done with those 7 years in college, you can be retired. That's nuts.
Yeah.
And that is an incredible thing to be able to do. But a lot of people don't do that because they fall victim to the flashy lifestyles. They're like, I have all this money coming in. I get to spend all this money. I get to live that, bachelor sports life, kind of a thing. But if we teach them now, or even early in high school and middle school, then I feel like they have a way better chance of progressing from there.
Yeah. And then again, it's fun. It's flashy. Mm-hmm. We all see the highlights and everything. Again, I'm going to bring up Carson Beck again, going to Miami. He was living the millionaire life down there and everything. Even for the 1 year he played there, he had a multi-million-dollar home that he had down there. Mm-hmm. He got millions of dollars from Miami. But there are so few of those players. Mm-hmm. And usually you're talking about the big marquee schools. You're probably just talking about the quarterbacks of those schools. Maybe a receiver, defensive end, get some pretty good money. But for the most part, we're talking about the quarterbacks at those schools. And if you're not those very few individuals, you're not going to get that flashy level of money. And with that, you don't need to keep chasing, his lifestyle and everything. Realize within your structure what you have. Mm-hmm. And then with that also comes the risk of the transfer portal with that. A lot of times You go there and you feel like this school didn't pan out for me, then I'm going to chase an NIL deal somewhere else. Well, unless your name's Carson Beck and you're going from Georgia to Miami and you already have a wink and nod agreement in place and you already have an NIL deal in place, over half of kids in a transfer portal don't even get a transfer.
Right.
And your college career is instantly over. Your scholarship's done and over with because you're not enrolled in school that promised you a scholarship. So now you're not only not getting the degree you were even going for, but you're also having that rough aspect of NIL is going to dry up. Now that social media brand you're doing is dried up. So you need to make sure you have something in place. You're actually setting up and going forward. Like you need to know that there is a way out. Otherwise, I feel the majority, you need to persevere through and push through and stick with it and gut it out and give it a longer try at the school you're currently at. Because, having that degree there is important, as well as also persevering through and hopefully that NIL money that will come afterwards as you grow within the system.
Well, like persevering through that is what a lot of people don't see the value in, and some do, but for the most part, you see all of these money deals being happening. But what you got to look at as well is getting that scholarship is huge. Like if you were fortunate enough to get a scholarship for playing and you get the free college education, there's a very small amount of people in this world that can do that. The rest of us have to pay for it.
Yeah.
So that alone is a huge value, and sticking through it to get that degree, take away the sports part of it. But if you come out the other side and you didn't get to go pro, you didn't get picked up by the NFL or the MLB or, whatever sport you're playing, you have a fallback already in place. And that is super value in itself.
Yeah. And then again, an area also the transfer portal that really runs the risk is finishing your degree.
Yeah.
For anyone that has ever experienced transferring schools for whatever reason, I'm not even talking about playing at the professional level. Like a lot of times you just went from one college to another. You moved, maybe you went to a different area, maybe trying to online school. One thing we all run into a lot of times is credits don't always transfer.
Correct.
And that is something that a lot of times, you may not look at like, college players aren't worried about actually finishing the degree. We need to focus on trying to finish that degree as well. And if you're transferring schools, if you do that 2 or 3 times, I can almost promise you, even though they're getting scholarship money each year, they're not finishing the degree.
Right.
Because as they transfer in, a chunk of the credits they have doesn't count. Yeah. So now they're going to have to redo those credits at that current school. Well, if they transfer again, a portion of those ones don't count, plus from the ones before don't count. So now you're still blowing that effect. So, you maybe had a scholarship and you went and you were enrolled in those schools for 4 or 5 years. You're probably not coming out with a degree at the end, unless you're getting the Van Wilder degree of
exactly.
years of study and we just gave you something. But look at it also the area of actually finishing a degree that is useful, because again, so few are going pro. And so few are getting the NIL deals that is retirement level money. Even if you're coming out with $100,000, that's very nice. That's very good starting money, but you still need to have that degree to finish.
Yep.
And you need to look at if you're transferring too many times, you're probably not going to finish that degree.
Well, no, exactly. Like you said, you're losing those points because not everything is going to transfer from college to college. And some college transfers, you don't get any accreditation transferred over. And that having to start over from the beginning just because you feel like you need more playing time as a freshman or something like that is a really unwise decision, in my opinion.
Yeah, because again, all NCAA and everything cares about is, are you enrolled at school? Are you taking full-time credits? And is your GPA okay? They don't care about your degree track and how you're doing with that. They don't care if you're 50, 60, 80% done with your your actual degree. They're not worried about that. All they're worried about is, are you enrolled full-time credit and the GPA of what you're doing. So again, if you're losing classes along the way, you're not getting those credits towards things, that's a redo, and that redo doesn't get paid for by the scholarship.
Nope.
So again, like you're having that element of making sure you're actually on a track to finish your degree, because that is important in the process of this. Because again, we're student athletes. We're student. It still needs to be a major portion of that.
Yeah, no, agreed. And it's important also to do your research while looking up what school to go to and things like that, because yes, there may be circumstances where you move or things like that where you do transfer to other colleges. But if you have a set long-term plan in play and you already know this is the school I want to go to, this is the degree while I'm playing I want to look at, and having those decisions already made going in, it makes it a little easier to just stick with it because you've already committed to this idea. Will that always stay the same? Probably not. Like things could fluctuate here and there, but to just uproot everything and just try to chase the money, if you will, is such a terrible idea at this level.
Yeah. So again, if you're not the 1% of the 1% of the kids entering the transfer portal that already kind of have those semi illegal deals in place and everything, because again, there's tampering rules and everything. But let's be honest, there's still talks behind closed doors with agents and everything. If you're not one of those players and everything, you need to take a real long look of is chasing the NIL currently the right thing for me? Is transferring schools the right thing for me? And then finishing that degree and everything. Because again, those things, if you ignore those things just because you think that it's going to be greener grass on the other side and shinier pastures and everything, that's not always the case and everything. And again, over half of kids don't get a transfer in the transfer portal. So let that sink in again. Over half of kids don't get that transfer in the transfer portal. And that's people that had bad advice in the year thinking that there was going to be this always great potential down the road. So now we're going to kind of try to look into what structure can be put in place now that I think that will actually help the structures of NIL and income from the schools and the transfer portal, and what we can try and do to help, set that system in place and everything where it'll benefit not only the players, but the schools and the whole system in general. So.
All right. Well, let's take a look at it then.
Yeah.
All right. So next we're going to be talking about parents and the guardrails that are in place as well. And at the collegiate level, how to navigate that as well. And what parents looking at all of these things can do as well.
Yeah, and again, you as parents are one of the first biggest influencers on your kids, and setting them up with their education and structure of knowing how to build a social media brand the right way, how to make sure that they're staying kid focused, not necessarily chasing the flashy aspect of it, making sure that they have the structures in place of also knowing the value of a dollar, what it's going to cost to actually have a budget in place, what it's going to be like to save for retirement. Making sure that they have the knowledge and skill and everything going into that, have the financial sense. I'm not saying they're going to not make mistakes along the way, but it's important for you to have those conversations with them at a younger age. Even maybe younger than high school age. Start at the middle school age. To really start going over what it's like building out there, doing it the right way. Not chasing the super flashy players out there, and making sure they're also creating the content out there that they can be proud of 10, 20 years down the road. Because how many times we see now a professional player that got we uncovered an old tweet about this player, and now all of a sudden things aren't going well for them because they were young and dumb and posted something they shouldn't have. I always go back to Herm Edwards talking about when he does the rookie symposium for the NFL and everything. He said, I wish I had a don't send button and everything because a lot of times you post things because you feel like you have to. I got to constantly tweet. I got to constantly post. I got to constantly be out there, and you post things that probably shouldn't. And for parents, that's where you instill into kids at a younger age what not to post, what not to chase about. Telling them hey, this is about the grind for your long-term life, not about going to a nightclub, not about chasing the flashy car, not about chasing the flashy brands and everything. This is if you want that long career, you got to chase the work, chase the grind. Post more of those 5 a.m. workout sessions. Post more about your nutrition and what you're doing out there. Post the highlight reels and everything, but not the fun flashy aspects of it as much. I'm not saying you don't do it at all, but just make sure you're putting it in perspective of you work hard to play hard, not play hard so you can work. So again, you probably won't work as hard and everything. Right. So you very important of that first aspect of putting that in place with your kids.
No, exactly, and I really hate and love social media because, like we were talking about, it can hurt you in the long term if you're dumb with it. But if you're taught how to be smart with it and not just chasing the money and things like that, you can do way more with it. You don't know who you're going to inspire with having that 5 a.m. workout, or people seeing you persevere through all of these hard workouts or hard work and still going to school and still keeping up with everything. You could inspire a lot of different people. A lot of people like to see the fun stuff, but are you really inspiring anyone to do anything? No, you want to see the hard work that this person is not only being able to have fun within reason, but also put in the work to start navigating through the long-term, the longevity of their career.
Yeah. And make it also where even if you go to a college and maybe you're not getting the playing time you thought and everything, make that the content journey.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, look at it like, hey, I'm on the depth chart. I'm all the way down here instead of up here.
Yeah.
Watch me as I climb that depth chart.
Yeah.
Watch me as I earn my playing time. Watch as I learn the playbook and study film. Show that as the perseverance of getting through that journey as your social media content with that.
So no, exactly. Having that being the content journey, like you said, is super important because you see the growth and you can see the progression just in general. And I think that's going to speak a lot more to recruiters than going out and partying and having those posts. And those sometimes might get you more followers, but if they're looking at it and like looking at you as an individual and seeing that you can continue and just push through and you're not getting playing time, but you're still, like you said, training, studying the playbooks, like doing everything you can to help better your team and yourself, that's going to speak a lot more.
Yeah, and again, famously also, the internet is forever.
Yeah.
Even if you delete a post, it's still out there somewhere. Someone's already screen grabbed it. Someone already downloaded it. Some way, somehow it's going to pop back up. And also to your coaches and potentially your future bosses, like, if you were out partying hard the night before and you were posting on social media and the next morning you're in a training session, clearly with your hoodie up and your hat pulled down and, you're kind of falling asleep in the session, coaches are going to see that on social media and know that you're not doing what it takes actually to get out there and do the work. Mm-hmm. So they're going to have it in the back of their head to not give you as much playing time. So that's going to hurt your career in that process as well because they know you're chasing that clout rather than actually putting in the work to play and everything. So, and then again, you're not earning the right to play and everything if you're not putting the work in the next day. So
right, and that's so I don't think a lot of these younger kids fully understand that, and getting that to sink in is sometimes probably challenging. But at the same time, like you said, you come in the next day clearly hungover, and the school, your coach, everyone has access to your social media. Yeah. Like they're going to find out, even if you delete the post, they're still going to find out. Someone's going to see it. They're going to say something. And that could hurt you in the long term because they're not obligated to give you anything past you being on the team.
Yeah.
Like you're not guaranteed playtime. You're not guaranteed anything. And if they feel like you're not going to fit in the best for the moments they need you, they're not going to go on to the next person. It's very competitive in general. Like we've said, only a very small percentage get those transfers or get to go professional and things like that. So to have all of these things work against you is hurting you.
Yeah, and again, I know we want the structure in place for the kids and everything. Now I'm going to say that colleges aren't innocent in this either and everything, and I do think that they need to have more structure in place for NIL and for the transfer portal to help these kids out as well. And also helps keep things more competitive. Mm-hmm. One of the main areas that I feel first off is colleges shouldn't just be raking in all the money, especially for the major sports. For the major sports, we're mainly talking about basketball and football for the most part. Mm-hmm. Yes, there's income from those sports, and yes, some of the profit from these sports helps fund some of the other sports, and that's an important aspect. But there needs to be some profit sharing and everything with this, and we need to have a structure in place that creates more of a salary cap. I personally think a salary cap at the NFL level works out really well to keep things competitive because every team has a hard cap. You can't go above it. There's no, it's not like basketball, you pay a penalty if you go above it. Like, no, NFL hard cap, that's the most you can spend, period, done. Now, I know sometimes you can shift money around from year to year, maybe move a signing bonus there. There's some ways around to it a little bit, but for the most part, I think a yearly hard cap per each player on the team and everything is a great way to set things up. A good portion of that should be from the money that's earned from that sport. I think that profit sharing should be in place for those kids on there. Very little of that I feel should be from sponsors. Again, I'm not saying that none can come from sponsors, but we need to have only a certain percentage, maybe 30%, 20%. I don't know what that number should be exactly, but we need to have a hard cap of what sponsors could actually give directly to the school versus what the profit sharing should be towards whatever that salary cap number is. Whether that's 20 million, 40 million, 50 million.
Right.
But we also need to find a number that's also competitive for the majority of the schools. Now, don't get me wrong. There's over 100 plus, college football teams and everything out there. Some of the smaller ones, unfortunately, you're just not going to have enough money to compete. I get that. That's part of the thing. But we need to have a number out there that the majority can be competitive at. I think somewhere around 20, 25 million, I think would be a good structured number to begin with, to start off with, that at least half or so of the schools should be able to afford, whether it's from the TV deal earnings that they're earning, from the ticket sales they're already getting, from all the merchandise that they're selling and everything like that. That number should be something that should be achievable through the majority of the colleges out there. And then with that structure, you can then disperse the money to your team however you feel like and everything.
Right.
You know, if you want to give most of it to your quarterback and some of it to your defensive ends, sure, that's up to the teams to decide what's important to them. But having that structure in place each year of knowing what each school can pay and setting that, I think is going to be a very, very big goal to at least starting the NIL cap on that.
Yeah, no, I agree completely with that. And that also would help a lot with these colleges. Like you said, they're not innocent in any of these. They're also, almost every school I know is out to get the money too. Like they're trying any way they can to bring in more funds. And so not exploiting the players as much and having like just a structure for the money and what it's going to and how it's doing, I think is important to have too, so that these kids that are coming in that don't typically know any better, they're not getting exploited. They're not getting used and then burnt out and used to the point of where they don't even want to do it anymore, because that does happen sometimes too, where you just get pushed to your limits so far that you're like, okay, I'm done. I don't want to do this anymore.
Yeah. And also with that structure in place also helps the transfer portal. We're going to dive a little bit more into the transfer portal in a minute, but like think about it this way. If you are player X and you're thinking about going to school A, and you see school A of that, let's say 25 million that we were mentioning earlier, let's say next year 22 of that million's already been allocated. They got 3 million to use. They can't promise you more than that,
right?
And you can know that going into how your transfer journey is looking like. If a school has 25 million and they've already used 25 million, there's no room for you. So again, you can't chase the NIL money, which then limits the idea of what it is going into the transfer portal, because you can look at it as being almost like a free agent of, they have a salary cap. This is how much they can afford for the budget. Going in what their wiggle room is, and you don't have to worry about them, over promising or lying a little bit to you, exaggerating what they have, because the money will be black and white right there on a sheet of paper. You can see we're paying all these players this much and everything. This is what we have to spend on free agents, if you will, from the transfer portal, and having that structure in place will help definitely educate you on where it is to transfer to. Now, I do want to get into, I think, now the guidelines. I think what transfer guidelines should be put in place. Some people remember years ago, it used to be if you transferred, you had to wait a whole year before you can play. I don't think that they're going back to that system is exactly right. I think initially you should get one freebie. So you go to a school, we're all young, we all get enamored. You go to a campus, they wow you. You're on there, like they break out every, the red carpet. Fireworks are going off, your names on the Jumbotron, maybe mom and dad play for the school, whatever the case is. Like you were enamored of your experience there, and you went there, and you're a kid. Now you're a young adult, you go there, it turns out it wasn't as what you thought it was. Maybe the coaches lied to you about your playing time, maybe the city and everything you're in, maybe it's just not the right environment for you. So you get one freebie. So you can transfer out for whatever reason. Now, I think after that, now we had to have structures in place.
Yep.
I think then the 1 year wait rule should come into play. So you can transfer out a second time, but now you have to wait a year, with a few exceptions. To me, those exceptions are if the head coach gets fired.
Yeah.
A lot of times, yes, the school's important. The school's a brand and everything, part of it too. But let's be honest, a lot of times kids are going there because they feel it's the right place for them, and that's usually the coaches and coaching staff.
Yep.
Well, if that coach and coaching staff isn't there anymore, I don't care
why
what
am I
school
here?
I was say, I was like, I don't care what school you're playing for. Like one of the main reasons why you went there was because, like, hey, this offensive coordinator had the right system that worked well for me as a quarterback, and like I fit well with them. Well, they're gone.
Yeah.
And now, like, okay, well, now what do I do? And the person they bring in, odds are, is going to have an opposite system, because a lot of times you see this at all sports. You hired an offensive coach now. That didn't work out, so now we hired a defensive coach.
Yep.
And so you now bring in someone with a totally different system in place. That that player now, like, it's maybe not the right fit for them now. So again, I think having that, if the coaches get fired, then the kid can then transfer out with that. And the other one would be also if there's sanctions put against a school, because kids should not be punished at these schools if the school did something wrong.
Exactly.
They broke a rule, they did illegal recruiting, they did whatever scandal and everything. If they get slapped with sanctions, that ban them from going to bowl games, or limit the amount of scholarships, or limit maybe that we've created now that $25 million cap, maybe they limit it to $20 million because of whatever they did wrong. The kids should be punished there.
Correct.
So giving them the ability then to leave, which it hurts the school a little bit, but hey, the school did something wrong.
Yeah, I was going to say it's their fault. So suffer the consequence.
Exactly. So hey, if you have to have a longer rebuild because you messed up, that's the school's fault. Like, you have no one to blame. You can't blame the player for now wanting to leave the situation that they weren't directly involved with. Now, if you were the player that was directly involved with you and you try to transfer, I promise you those schools will look a little bit before they bring you on board.
Exactly.
But for the most part, again, college, teams have, 80 plus kids and everything on a roster. It's not all their fault, So again, giving them an opportunity to go somewhere else because the school messed up, I think it's the other caveat to where they would be allowed to transfer out.
No, I agree completely, because that at least gives some flexibility to, if outside of our control, the school does something like you said, fire the coach or allocate funds differently and things like that. And now you're like one of 80 and you were promised you'd be one of 10, on the roster and different things like that. Looking at those different things and being able to have options is important, because at that point, it's not you being negligent. It's not you not trying hard enough. It's their fault. And I agree with that.
Yeah. So again, things are outside of your control. So again, you're not just chasing the next payday. You're not just chasing the next promise to be a starter and everything. Right. There's structures in place. Again, you get the one mulligan. We all love that in golf. You get the one redo and everything. But after that, then there's structure into it. And I was waiting a year even isn't that bad if that's truly the right decision for you. It just keeps it where there's actually a legit decision being made, not just constantly chasing the next shiny object and everything. But then again, if your coaches get fired, if the school gets slapped with sanctions and everything, those I think are very reasonable reasons as to why someone should be allowed to transfer out and everything. So I think in general, those are at least the initial guidelines. Now, do I think that will fix everything within NIL and the structure of the transfer portal? No. But I think it's definitely at least a great starting point. And then from there, we can see where do we need to tweak it at. Does that 25 million need to turn into 30 million? Do we need to shrink it down to 20 because of not enough schools being able to afford it? We'll be able to figure that out as that trial and error goes, as we all love test and adjust.
Yeah, that's right.
So you have that trial period with it. But I think we can all agree the Wild Wild West era that we have right now is not the answer that we want.
No, it's making it so difficult to navigate any of this for any of these kids and parents, and like even the schools to an extent, even if they're doing things right, having to navigate around the policies and procedures that are in place right now. It just doesn't make sense anymore.
Yeah, so I think that kind of covers the idea of the trials and tribulations, if you will, of what the NIL deal and the social media aspect for athletes we have these days, and potentially some of the solutions and everything we have to try to help make it at least better initially that we can then build off of from there and everything. So I think we're going to kind of wrap things up from there.
All right. So to kind of close everything up, NILs aren't going anywhere. The money isn't necessarily going anywhere. And we have navigated through the different portals and options of what we feel would be best to look at and some of the changes we would like to see in it as well.
Yeah, and again, please, if you feel like you agree with us, disagree with us, or if you have other ideas and thoughts, please put those in the comments. We can kind of build on this. This is definitely something we're trying to build from. Do you think there should be a minimum for NIL deals? Do you think there should be a ceiling cap to NIL deals? And then from that also, do you think that if you come out of your 7 potential year college career and everything, would that be enough for you just to retire on? Let's say you had 5 or 10 million from NIL deals. Do you think living off of $200,000-$400,000 a year is enough? I mean, I think that's more than enough for me. Yeah. So, again, you could potentially at 25 years old be set for $200,000 a year for the rest of your life and everything. That's a pretty comfortable living to me.
Absolutely.
So, again, or do you look at it like, hey, if I came out with $100,000 over my college career, now I stash that all to the side. I enjoy my normal career, and now I got the retire on. So please put those thoughts and everything in the comments of where you feel like the thing should be, other ideas that we can have for those guardrails. If you think they were complete idiots, put that in the comments too, and everything. Of how to build a brand for these kids and everything out there. Because again, we're trying to do this the right financial sense way. Of what we're trying to build towards and everything, because again, as we always try to remember, we got to build wealth the boring way,
so your kids can live the bold way. Till next time.
Absolutely. Thank you.